just a few more days and then I'm away to my home where joy will never end.
But if they can't accept you, they have to come up with a reason. And it's psychiatrist was the reason. Well, this happened on Christmas Eve, I think it was. And I washed out of cadets. Of course, there I'm 18 years old. And I washed out of cadets was one of the biggest disgraces I'd ever experienced, personally. And so I tried to call home, never could get through. I tried to call a friend of my sister's in LA, couldn't get through. And then our pay didn't come through. So here I am stuck in this stupid air base in Santa Ana, California. No money, and Christmas, can't get a phone line through, and I was just one sad puppy.
Oh, man.
So I for some reason I thought, well, I think I'll go buy some cigarettes. So I did. I started smoking. And it was a terrible thing. When I finally got up to 5 packs, I quit years later.
Hey Dad, can you tell the story about how you quit smoking?
Well, that was with Gavin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had never. I tried many times to quit smoking. I hated smoking as a will because it was such a filthy habit. I had a little bit of a tip off. I used to lead community singing, that sort of thing, at banquets and stuff like that. And this one day they had at the Episcopal Parish Hall, they had some kind of a 4-H or some kind of a banquet there, and I was leading the group singing, and so we sat there at this banquet, and when I stood up, I couldn't see anything. Just above our heads was solid cigarette smoke. You could not see a person, any people. You knew they were all there, hundreds of them around those tables, but you couldn't see any of them. And oh man, that's the first time that ever hit me, what these poor people who didn't smoke were going through. And in those days, you could be shot for the idea that you could object to smoking. Smokers dominated everything, and don't you forget it. And people that roll over and play dead, and that got me really. I come almost to the point of quitting then. Not close enough that I did. And then through the years I quit many times. Regularly I'd quit for a while. But this one day that I think it happened with, I can't remember, but anyway, it had to do with someone following your example, and you might smoke, no big deal. Someone might watch you and start smoking, and they'd wind up, ruining their lives. The same thing, of course, applied in the same area with drinking. And
wasn't that a sermon or something that the minister gave?
Yeah, a Methodist minister. Methodists, that's what they do. They focus on alcohol and tobacco, this sort of thing. Temperance lectures are a permanent part of the Methodism party line, that all ministers have to give a certain number of these temperance sermons. But this, and I'd heard them all my life, but this particular sermon got into this business of that, 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 that you drink and don't have any problem. Someone watches you drink and they become an alcoholic. I knew what an alcoholic was. My father was an alcoholic. My brother was an alcoholic. They died alcoholics. And then by this time we had a little boy. And it suddenly dawned on me that this was valid. I had no way of controlling this. I had never thought about the logic of it. You can't, we're all role models and we have nothing to say about it. The only thing we have to say is what kind of a role model. And so I just quit. And that was the end of the drinking thing. I never would say I would get sick if I'd get drunk. I've been drunk a few times and it would take me sometime months before I could even think of the idea of taking a drink, getting nauseous. So there wasn't much chance of my ever becoming an alcoholic. I guess that doesn't lend itself to it. But it certainly doesn't have stop someone who admires you start, and that's the end of their life, because they'll never be able to give it up.
But you said that now that your ice cream's all melty, you said that drinking when you were over in England in World War II was about the only thing you could do as a GI, right?
Oh yeah, because all the people in England, except the sweet young things, hated American servicemen. Because we came over there with all the money in the world compared to England, and took all their women away from them, and it was just horrible. So you'd go to you'd go to church, and people who weren't in the pub crowd, and people in church simply wouldn't have anything to do with you. They just freeze you right out. So finally I discovered that the only place that you could be accepted at all was at these pubs. Well, I didn't drink. I just hated the smell of beer made me sick. But my goodness, you have to do something. That loneliness and sort of thing, not belonging, is very difficult to live with. And so I started going to the pubs, and eventually I learned to like English beer. And that was the beginning of this. As I say, I was protected because of not being able to be a very good drinker. For example, the first time I got drunk, we had 12-hour passes when we were getting ready to go overseas. And we'd go into New York for 12 hours, and of course, kids like us, it was the first time in those days that most of us of that age had ever had an opportunity to drink. And so obviously we were not at all good at it. And I got drunk. We wound up in one of the big Pennsylvania hotel, I think it was, drinking brandy with Ed Crowley, the publisher of the Reader's Digest. And I have no idea how we ever got into that situation. These guys were paying for our drinks. And when I got up in the morning, I was back on base. I was so sick. I would have killed anybody that even looked like they wanted to tell me to get up, including the first sergeant. So it took me a couple of days even to consent to get up. I was just sick to death.
So you're like Gage's age, right? You're 18, 19, something like that?
Well, that's a great thing to have no tolerance for.
Yeah.
Looks like you had a pretty small ceremony for a marriage, the wedding.
Well, we didn't have 350 people.
But I mean, this
But we
pic-
didn't have 3 dance bands either. And we didn't.
but the picture here is probably just the key people, and they were.
Well, no,
probably-
that's the key people that was in the wedding party. The people that were most of them are my brothers. But I mean,
There was a church full of people.
yeah, there was probably 150 people.
Okay. Yeah. For
See,
some
it was
reason.
right after Christ rose, and so there was,
There were not very many Christians.
Which picture?
It's the wedding. And there's
They
the-
still hadn't decided to come back yet. You know, they were still running away. So
I suggest, Nikki, that you grab hold of something very
And you want to see the
solid.
other one? We were talking about.
Glare.
I didn't even realize he
Tilt
quit
it.
smoking because the ashtrays were
Tilt it.
all the ashtrays were at home were heaped. All the ashtrays at work were heaped up with cigarette butts.
Okay.
And I didn't empty them, so I didn't know that he quit smoking. And then he was kind of crabby and said, "What's the matter with you anyway?" And he said, "Well, I quit smoking." You did, and I couldn't understand it because
It
the
didn't read
ashtrays
from
were
up.
all still full.
I remember too. That's so I quit smoking.
Oh, so then I emptied the ashtrays, and they didn't get filled up again. That was really nice.
well, I think at the wedding you specialized in weenie water soup and
No,
all that poor people stuff.
that had nothing. That was when I was growing up. That wasn't.
Tell
And
the
that was a
children about
neighbor.
weenie water soup.
weenie water soup.
Oh, this is our neighbors that, when I was growing up, we were really, really poor. We had a pitcher pump outside. We had no electricity.
What's a pincher pump?
A pitcher pump
Oh, pitcher pump.
that you go outside and you pump your water.
So, right.
Well, the neighbors that lived just a little bit away from us, they were poorer than we were. So when they'd have hot dogs, wieners, we call them. We didn't call them hot dogs then. Wieners. They'd have wieners one day, boiled in water, and then the next day they'd have weenie water soup. The water that they had heated the wieners in, they used to make soup. And then they used to starch clothes. And she'd make the starch up and starch the clothes, and then what was left, she'd just put a little sugar in there and thicken it up, and that'd be pudding. So,
You want the dog in the room?
no,
Hey, look,
that's just the way it was. When we'd go for a ride on Sunday afternoons, we'd all get a half a stick of juicy fruit gum.
Oh my goodness.
Never anything but half a stick of juicy fruit gum. Never a whole stick. And for years, a whole stick of gum seemed so big in my mouth after I worked and could buy my own gum. I still prefer a half a stick of gum.
And you prefer it for us too. We always got a half a stick of gum.
Well, enough for me is enough for you.
Snickers bar cut into 6 different pieces.
And when my mom would go to auxiliary about once a month, and we'd have to stay home, my dad would bring a Mr. Good bar that would be about that big, and it was in little squares like this, and we might get 2 squares
Sanji.
of all chocolate. And that was for staying home and being good.
There's a woman in your wedding photos.
Yeah.
She's black.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only black one.
Stella Woodley was her name.
Woodley.
She's a beautiful singer. She's the one that sang at our wedding.
There's a picture of her singing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was that pretty odd?
Yep. Because they had a black Methodist church and a white Methodist church. But we liked her singing, so we asked her to sing for her.
Lovely girl.
Did anybody give you grief about it?
No.
She probably sang so good that it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And what did people say when you became Baha'is?
That's what they said.
What?
Nothing.
Nothing.
You walk across the other side of the street, they see you coming.
So they didn't have to talk to us.
Really? This was all in
Downtown.
Nebraska?
They really did cross the street and everything?
Yep.
Literally. All the
You want
ministers.
it, son?
You can take that away from
Let
me.
me go.
Yeah.
Let me go.
Make up. Here, roll it.
They'd see you coming, they'd simply cross the street so they didn't have to.
Pass you by.
Get involved.
Like say hi.
They didn't like try to bring you back or anything?
Oh, well, yeah, to begin with, they did.
But once they realized you were pretty set. Wow.
Once you'd converted a couple of them, then they got really
Well,
worried.
actually, we never converted any of them.
Well, the Methodist preacher, our minister came over and to talk about the faith because we really kind of screwed the church up a little bit. We were the center of the young adult thing. Of course, we didn't at the time know what was going on, but we had this young adult class, and after we read this new era, and we ran into all this neat stuff. Why, of course, we that's what we talked about at these weekly study classes at the church, the young adult. And man, people just went bananas
We had people
over
coming,
all
big
these
crowd
principles.
coming.
That they were just nuts. That thing, that little thing where there were maybe half a dozen people. It was up around 40 before you could hardly say scat. They're just people just beating the door down to attend. We didn't necessarily have any idea. It just was a real exciting time. But having heard of the faith, not being Baha'is, we weren't bound by any ethics. You know, you did whatever your nature was to do, and you talked about these sorts of things, and I suppose it all has to do with proselytizing and whatever it took.
But we were behind then.
It wasn't a secular type of thing.
You were
just
investigating still.
Yeah.
It was just exciting spiritual stuff, and it communicated. These other people in this class, they were as excited as we were, but the difference was that when we became Baha'is and found out we couldn't do this anymore, that you didn't push people, you didn't.
Well, we weren't pushing people, really. You were just talking about it. But
Well,
then,
no, but we couldn't start.
Yeah.
We couldn't, just because we knew something, we couldn't press it. You know, if someone didn't want to hear, that became a factor. When you become a Baha'i, you must not be discourteous and try to force the faith onto someone who doesn't want to hear.
Did the minister know that you were doing the New Era stuff and attracting all these
No.
folks?
I don't suppose.
because we
so.
didn't really realize that what we were doing either. I mean,
Eventually, why he came over, and we were going to talk about this because.
well, that was
his-
because
his,
they had told us that we needed to resign from the church, and we had written a letter resigning from the Methodist Church, and he came over to talk to us.
Now remember the thing. I can't remember the story of Abdul Baha, where he talked about someone had asked about attending church, and I can't even remember how this story went, except someone had asked him about attending church services. And the master said, well, why? You should ask yourself why you should attend services. And that was his answer.
Well, we heard that when we went to a Baha'i meeting in Omaha, wasn't it? When somebody asked us why we were still going to church. We didn't see why we couldn't.
When you raise that question, all of a sudden it's very different. And we suddenly saw the reason that you really should no longer pretend that you're something that you aren't. You're really at a place where you're making a choice, and so there again, that's not, you can associate with this affiliation has to be dealt with. When we sent that letter of resignation, they really bent about a shape.
Were both of your families involved in the in that same church?
No, because this was in Valentine. Just Stanley.
No,
My brother that's the same age as, almost the same age as Grandpa.
no, both our families were
Well,
Methodists.
both of our families.
But not
That's
both
right.
of them lived in that area.
No,
Not
What?
different towns.
the Reed family lived there
Oh,
in
okay.
Valentine.
Wasn't there a lady that said something about, I remember a story about some lady saying, you know, you could be that religion but raise your children to be nice Methodists.
Oh yeah,
or
that's
something.
when she came, after we quit going to church.
Oh, yeah.
This
Mrs. Wilkinson.
Mrs. Wilkinson came over, and she's really concerned. She said, well, it's okay if you want to do that to your lives, but, you know, what are you going to do about your children? Because at that time, Gavin and Nikki were born and going to Sunday school and this sort of thing. But it was funny because I've kind of interrupted Dad, but when the minister came over to talk to us, he really turned us every way with this, because we had only read, we didn't know all that much about the Baha'i faith, and we'd only read a little bit of the new era. And so we weren't really prepared to do, have a discussion or an argument.
We weren't going to argue.
And we weren't going to argue, but anyway, so he came over to talk to us, and we were just sort of fiddling around about not really getting down to anything. You know, it's about the weather and everything like that, and pretty soon Gavin got really mad, and he stood up, and he's only about, what, 4? 5? He goes like, I thought you were going to talk about Baha'u'llah. So we talked about Baha'u'llah. He sort of kept us in line ever since. Yeah, they all have.
We were shamed into the faith.
I have no recollection.
So I'm seeing there's a letter here. This is pretty cool.
Which
It's
one?
full of interesting stuff. It's a letter here addressed to Dan Jordan from Horace Hulley
Yeah.
of the NSA of the Baha'is of America
Yeah.
of the United States. Basically confirming with him that you guys had been enrolled as Baha'is.
Yeah.
That's
The way
pretty cool.
we did it, we came in by mail. We had to write. He sent in our enrollment cards. Then we had to write why we wanted to be Baha'is, a letter of why we wanted to be Baha'is, and send it to them.
Each had to write a separate letter.
And we had, well, no, we read. I think we just wrote them together. But anyway, we sent it to the national office in Wilmette. And then they sent, because Danny had come back from England to go into the service, and our sister-in-law Nancy, who was also a Baha'i, was working in Hemingford, which was closer to Alliance. They sent the cards to her, and then she sent them to us. So it was a very long, drawn-out affair. And at that time, then we decided we wanted to order all the books Baha'i books that were available, which weren't very many. But we didn't only order from the little catalog that came out. We ordered all the books that we read anything about in any of the books, and so we ordered Kitabi Akdas. And they wrote back and told us that, well, they were sorry that hadn't been translated. This was 1950, what, must have been 1958 by then. But anyway.
Wow.
So it was really neat. Long time ago.
And how did you decide to go pioneering?
I don't know, how did we decide to go pioneering?
Well, that didn't take long at all, in terms of the pioneering part, because you don't really have to get very far into the writings before you this grabs you. The point of being a Baha'i has to do with this pioneering is just really big stuff, which is what a Baha'i should do, especially since there weren't preachers. And we seem to grasp this almost instantly and take it personally, then this was what, something like 2 weeks after we had become Baha'is. What am I trying to say?
I don't know. Are you talking about when we sold our business?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at, right. 2 weeks after we became Baha'is, there's this business that I was sure, newspaper business, I was sure I was going to die with, because a great life, we enjoyed it. And 2 weeks after we became Baha'i, we sold out and started making arrangements to do this pioneering number, even though we didn't really know what it was. It was, you go someplace and find some way of spreading the cause. And how we wound it, we only had you all heard 10,000 times. The only criteria we had was that we go someplace warm, because we both hate cold weather. And we wound up coming to help save the assembly in Fairbanks, Alaska. We've never figured out, it seems to me there was a period of time just after we made this decision that we knew why we did it. But
Because they wouldn't
I
let us
no-
go to Hawaii or Easter Island
I
Or
have
Mexico.
or Mexico.
No recollection of the
And it spoke
specific
English and-
reason how we decided on Alaska. I have no idea. They were trying to get us to Dave Rue was trying to get us to pioneer to some place. It wasn't Spokane, but some town in Washington, and we were really tempted. That sounded like a good move. After we got, Hawaii and Easter Island out of our system, why, how we actually made that decision and bought a trailer and pulled it to Alaska is still a mystery.
You drove a trailer all the way to Alaska?
There's a picture in there someplace.
We had written to, we had a 10 by 46 mobile home, and we bought an International Harvest cement block hauling truck, and put a hitch on it and pulled this trailer to Fairbanks.
With the Volkswagen bus bolted to the top of it.
And we took the wheels off our Volkswagen bus and
A flatbed truck.
clamped the and that's where
Oh, the truck, the bug was in the flatbed? Of
yeah,
the truck?
it was U-clamp. We took the wheels off and you clamped it to the bed of the truck, so it was stationary. And then we didn't have Danny then. Gavin and Nikki and Tim rode in because we didn't have room for them in the
They were
cab
in
of
the
the
trailer?
truck, and so they rode up in the Volkswagen bus, and if they needed to go to the bathroom or something, they had to honk the horn so that we knew we had to stop, so that because they needed to go to the bathroom or something.
There was a definite lag between honking and stopping.
Well, we had to find a place because we were 70 foot long, so we'd have to find some place where we could stop. We couldn't just stop in the middle of the road someplace.
Yes, but when you're 5, that doesn't make a difference.
Now, did you have a clue what was going on? Like why the heck they were doing this?
Well, yeah, I think so because we
I don't
talked a
remember
lot
being-
about the faith.
Yeah, I don't remember being puzzled by it.
Because we talked, I mean, when we first found the faith, we talked nothing except about the Baha'i faith. So,
But at 5, you kind of live in the moment.
yeah.
Yeah, I
But
guess,
Shelley was the baby. Because she was born in January and this was in June or July or something.
But Gavin and I made up songs. Songs like, I've gotta go, I've gotta go, I've gotta go, 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 go.
I didn't know that. I've never heard that before.
No, we were up in the Volkswagen bus.
Run to the bus and move.
Huh?
Run to the bus.
Oh, we traded it when we got up here because it was too cold.
Oh my god. That was the flood.
And then Gavin made a song. Do you remember your song, Gavin? The world is flat. It's very old. Remember that one?
Well, that came much later.
No, I think you made that up in the van.
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
Have I heard this song? I don't think I've heard this song.
I'm not gonna sing it.
Is it gross?
It's just stupid.
Well, I mean, you was all of 6 or 7 when you made it up.
Yeah.
Hey, Grandpa, about your best friend when you were young.
Okay, the black friend you had?
Yeah. And some incident, but I can't remember what it was. That was pretty powerful. Maybe it was just your friendship in general was odd.
But maybe it was
back
about the
then.
teacher.
It was it did have to do with the teacher. It was some classroom thing.
Well, yeah, because we only had one black family in Valentine. That was it. The projectionist at the theater was black, but he was just a single man. The Hayes were the only black family in town, and the boy of this family, we became just inseparable friends. And so when we got into high school, the math teacher was a nigger hater. Just at the time I didn't realize how extreme a person he was, because he was kind of halfway pleasant sort of a fellow, and not very bright, but a wonderful math teacher for high school students. In every class we always had 1 or 2 students who knew much more about math than he did, but he was able, because of this, to explain math on a level that the student could understand. He was I say, a very effective teacher, but he hated the niggers, and he hated anyone that was associated with someone black. So he spent as much of every class that he could getting me up to the board and finding some way of humiliating me, because I never was very strong in math, but otherwise I was valedictorian of the class, and I was even good at math when we went into algebra, but he spent so much time embarrassing me when I'd call me up to the board and find some way of find something I couldn't answer, and it stuck. It had enough of an effect that I never learned anything about algebra, and I never was handled math very well after that. I just seemed to, whatever took place. But let's say the man was a very effective high school.
Well, what happened to Doug?
Math
Wasn't
teacher.
there something that happened to Doug?
Was Doug in the class?
Yeah.
What did he do to Doug?
I was so busy apparently defending myself that I don't remember anything about. Other than the rudeness and crudeness that he treated this boy with, and made no bones about it, just right out front. And I know later I would have been delighted if he would have done that same thing a few years later. I would have had his job in 5 minutes. but I was a freshman in high school. But I say, he was really an effective, really quite a fine man, except for this race thing. He fit right into the high school thing. And we didn't have any all we had were whites in town, so it wasn't an issue. We just had this one one family, and they certainly didn't count.
What did Doug's dad say to you when Doug brought you home? Or say to Doug? Wasn't that where he said he never thought he'd have a white guy visit, or was that another incident?
Oh, yeah, Doug had been in the service, and he'd grown up, you know, with white people, and was perfectly comfortable, not completely unaware of race. They had never encountered race in his personal life. So when he'd gone into the service, and he had come back, and Doug met somebody on the train, some red-headed kid that they just kind of hit it off. So Doug invited him to his uncle's place for dinner in Kansas City, and so they went to dinner, and Doug said that his uncle was acting kind of funny.
It's the kid's uncle.
He went.
No.
Huh?
It's the kid's uncle, not Doug's uncle, right?
No, this is Doug's uncle.
Oh, okay.
No, Doug's uncle. The kid was a red-headed
Oh, okay.
Caucasian.
Okay.
And Doug said that his uncle acted kind of funny, but he knew him well because they'd visited down there a number of times. But when this kid left, why, the uncle apparently had just been doing everything he could to control an absolutely uncontrollable rage. And when this kid left, why, this uncle stood up, just shaking all over, and says, "Douglas," he says, "I want you to know that's the first time I've ever had a white man with his feet under my table." And Doug says he was just frightened to hear the anger in his uncle's voice, because he'd never run into these feelings. But it must have been a very difficult thing for him.
Say the name of your newspaper.
Cherry County News.
And before that, your dad owned how many newspapers?
5 newspapers. Little tiny country weekly things. They meant well.
So why was it called Cherry County? Are there cherries in that county?
Choke cherry.
That was just the name of the county. I have no idea what it was. It was probably named after somebody by the name of Cherry, but I don't know that.
Are we going to watch the video for the graduation tonight?
Are we doing the fans?
Get
Courtship? Oh, gee.
Yeah, good one, Mom.
Huh? Is that a good one?
Yeah.
Well, you might get 2 different
That is 2 different stories.
Yeah.
The A side and the B side.
Well, mostly, I think the reason why we got together in the first place was because we both, well, I almost had a nervous breakdown when I was working in Alliance. And my brother Stan had opened a jewelry store in Valentine where Grandpa lived.
What was Alliance?
Alliance, Nebraska was where I was born,
Okay.
raised, graduated from high school, worked. But anyway, so
Thank you.
Stan said, well, why don't you come and see if you can get a job in Valentine. So he had found some place where I could work, and so I moved to Valentine. But anyway, I'd met Grandpa before because he had come, Stan had brought him home because they were very good friends because they both sang in choir, they both went to the Methodist church and everything, and so they became very, very good friends. And so Stan would bring Grandpa home to Alliance, when, like, for Mother's Day or whatever. So I knew him that way, but then of course then when I moved to Valentine and got a job and everything, and we sang in the choir and we went to the young adults together and we just hung out together because it was just sort of like a group thing because there was Stan and other bunches of other people, and I just sort of inherited the group when I moved to Valentine. So, and then I don't remember how we started going together. Oh, I guess all I remember is the one taffy pulling party we had that they had, and they were. They gave, I don't know whether you know taffy pulling.
Oh, I love taffy pulling.
It's really it's almost sugar and water is what's it mostly that you boil it and then you get it sort of soft and then you have to pull it, and then it puts air bubbles in it so that it's not really just solid, and so it makes it white or pink, or well, you can put coloring in it and make it pink, and you can put peppermint flavoring in it or something. But anyway,
Don't you have to butter your hands?
yeah, you have to butter your hands, and because Grandpa was a printer, he had all this ink pigment in his hands, so his taffy turned out gray because it pulled all of the black pigment out of it. And nobody wanted to eat his taffy. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know how we started going together. I can't remember when you first asked me for a date because we did. But they were trying to put us together a lot. And so we ended up going together, and then he ended up telling me that he couldn't afford to get married, so that broke us off, and then he decided that he could afford me, I guess. Asked me to marry him, and I said yes, so we got married. I don't know, is that tumultuous enough?
You have to spice it up. Okay, Dad.
There's the other side. No, I wanted to get married in the worst way, but you bring to a relationship that the real person behind that, and I had such an inferiority complex that it finally dawned on me this woman would have to be nuts to even consider marrying somebody like me, and it was just so absolutely preposterous that I simply couldn't live with it. It just seemed like a dishonorable thing to do to someone, to ask them to marry you, and so I just thought, it didn't happen, but it did trigger an examination of my real feelings that were really strong in spite of what I thought of myself. That I really dig this lady, and eventually, like the song goes, "Let me reconsider," and we wound up bringing you guys.
So, did you run across a field of flowers when you changed your mind, or anything
No.
like that? Something picturesque?
Yeah, we just wearing yellow slippers.
And that's all.
Through a cactus.
Oh yeah, that's not too picturesque. Okay, so
No swimming of rivers or hijacked
no,
planes or.
No.
And then how long?
clandestine meetings in the Badlands.
Did you ask for her mother's hand in marriage? Or the hand in
Yeah,
marriage from her
he
mother?
did.
Yeah, your dad had died by then, right? He died when you
Oh
were
yeah, he
15.
died when I was 15.
And then, okay, so from the point when you asked her, right?
Mhm.
And then it didn't happen the other way around, like for anybody back then. It just it wasn't happening. Then how long was it until you got married?
No, this was what, in August, and we got
not
married in
very long.
October.
Yeah,
Wow.
not very long. Well, I finally got it through my thick head. I would like to have been married the next day.
Oh, it was pretty weird because I was going out with some other guys, and I think that might have been one of the things because he was at he'd come to a carnival with Stan, my brother. And I'd gone to the carnival with another guy that I worked with out at Cherry Todd Electric, the electric company where I was secretary. And I waved to him. On the where the Ferris wheel.
They noticed me.
Yeah.
There they go.
And it was,
What did I do?
well, it was about the next day or two you called and said,
Ooh, plotty.
I had a way with words.
But anyway, that's about the way it went.
And how old were you, Dad, when
You
they
were-
became Baha'is?
5?
Well, we became Baha'is in 1957?
January 1957. We'd sent the cards in in 56. We didn't get the thing back through the area teaching committee and then ultimately from the national office
So
until
4.5.
January 27th.
Okay.
So just Nikki and Gavin, Gavin and Nikki were alive at that time. We just had those two.
I remember watching you say the obligatory prayer together in the living room. That gigantic living room.
Yeah.
Huge.
It wasn't any bigger than this one.
I know. And the other thing I remember is when you got the news the Guardian had died. And all I knew was that I remember Dad being really upset.
Yeah. And I don't really know why we were upset because we didn't know the Guardian, who the Guardian really was. You know, we were just, that was the first year. And we weren't around Baha'is, except that Dan called us every once in a while and kept us, my brother Dan, and kept us up on what was going on and everything. And he called and told us that Shogi Fendi had passed away. And we were exceedingly sad and cried and cried. And
I cried for a week.
Gavin over there, he says, I thought you were supposed to be happy when somebody died.
Oh, smart Alec.
What a smart aleck kid.
I don't remember any of this.
Or looking over the back seat as we were driving along. Dad, what's the speed limit? I knew exactly he knew what the speed limit was. Why he'd ask that stupid question. I thought the Baha'is were supposed to obey the law.
So we stayed with it.
That was the end of my. I always drove. This was in the days of '60, I think it was at that time. It was before the '55 stuff, and my standard speed was 70, and but after that incident, it was 60.
Now it sounds like Dad and both Dad and Nikki didn't, like, as far as you guys becoming Baha'is, they weren't weirded out. It wasn't really strange, but I'm wondering maybe, at least for Dad, if the fact that you sort of had to disconnect from a lot of the people you were close with in the church was weird. You know what I mean? If that, maybe it didn't, but it would seem to me like that might affect him, or maybe do you even remember that at all? Sort of having to never sing these people again and having them avoid you, and
They may have, Mom and Dad may have some observations that I don't remember, but my only recollection was I had really just started Sunday school, because like I say, it was like 4.5 years old when this happened. So my only remembrance of Sunday school, Methodist Sunday school, is, you know, we had, it was like we made this craft thing, and it was some kind of a cut out a pig, you know, a holy picture from some program, you know, kind of a thing. It looked, I don't remember what it was. You know, some bearded guys standing around doing something. Glue it on a doily, you know. That was the thing. And I remember that there was these older kids. There might have been, you know, 6. that took mine and cut it up. So I wasn't really, I didn't have a big emotional connection to the Sunday school thing. So I do remember sitting in church and hearing Dad sing. But as an individual, I had no connection to the church, or Methodism or anything. I mean, I was just a little kid.
Or to the people.
No.
Didn't really care.
No, because the only people I remember really is Uncle Stan, Aunt Winnie, and Ann, their daughter, my cousin. I don't really remember anybody else from those days.
It was in that limited space of time, though, when I found out what it was to feel like a parent. Because we were sitting in a balcony at this time during
Well, this was before we were behind. So.
Hmm?
This is before we were behind.
I hadn't even thought about when it was, but they had a program of some sort.
It was a Christmas program.
And Gavin was standing next to this other little boy. I guess there was a line of them there, but he was standing next to this little boy. And during that, we were sitting right on the kind of in the front row of in the balcony, and they were just standing there.
Shut the door,
And this-
Jamal.
This other little jerk next to Gavin just reached over there and gave him a shove, and just shoved him the heck out of the way. And I guess he wanted to stand there, and I came that far from jumping off of that balcony down there and killing that little fella. That was the first time I went absolutely out of my mind with anger. And just lost it. But of course, I probably couldn't have cleared the rail anyway, so.
But anyway, afterwards, when we asked Gavin, why did that little boy push you? I don't know. I just guess he wanted to stand there. He didn't get mad. He wasn't mad. No, we thought he was mad. Oh, he just got. I guess he just wanted to stand there.
So it could have been anything you said.
I have no recollection.
Just the doily thing. Maybe he was one of the ones that cut your doily.
I didn't chop his doily up. I was always a little kid. I was a little kid.
Probably with the big mouth though, huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say with the wife.
I don't think so.
Wow.
I became a wiseacre later. I don't recall being a wiseacre as a little kid.
What's a doily?
The doily, in this case, it was a paper doily. It was just like a fancy, like when you like a paper snowflake looks similar to that.
For Valentine's. Like for Valentine's, those little white lacy things. That you
It's a white lacy
part-
thing.
Oh.
It's like it's made of paper.